No NBA wins in preseason? Irrelevant. The Pelicans' offensive firepower and defensive potential are the real story. Let's break down why New Orleans fans should be excited despite the scoreboard. It's the Tuesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with you on this Thursday, one more day. And the Pelicans are playing and starting their regular season. I'm excited. I hope you are excited too, and we're going to cover it all in this whole season here on Locked On Pelicans. But I want to look at, despite no wins against NBA teams, they got 2 in preseason, but not against NBA teams. I'm not concerned. Their offense, when you really look at the film, look good. Same thing for their defense. There are concerns, and we'll look at both of those. But overall, you can see the potential for this Pelicans team. Plus, we'll look at a surprising thing when it comes to the final roster spot for New Orleans. We've got a lot to cover in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget, you can also watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, same place you watch your Pelicans play, every weekday at 10:30 a.m. And if you're not an everyday, it's okay. I appreciate you just tuning into Locked On Pelicans whenever and however you do. So let's get into preseason for New Orleans. And I really want to focus on the games against the Houston Rockets and the Orlando Magic. The games in Australia were nice, and you got a good glimpse of the Pelicans' potential there too. But going up against NBA teams, NBA players, to me is a little bit more telling. And while the Pelicans went 0-2 in both those games, one, they were really close against the Houston Rockets. You know, they were pretty close in a comeback against the Orlando Magic too, when the Orlando Magic were playing their starters and New Orleans was kind of resting theirs. So I do actually think that that is an encouraging sign. So when you get into the Pelicans numbers, and I have access to Synergy this year, Synergy Sports, which provides some of the best data you can get in the NBA, and we're going to use that throughout the season here. You know, you see the Pelicans grading out pretty well on offense. You know, when you get these kind of detailed report cards on Synergy, they kind of grade teams out in terms of points per possession or points per shot attempt, something that I've used for years here. Overall, New Orleans looks good when it comes to just everything. Their points per shot attempt rating was good overall. They weren't an elite team in everything, but they were kind of right up in there with it all. And there were certain areas that when you watched them play, the stats back it up. And that's where I want to kind of focus here. This Pelicans team should be an elite pick and roll team this year. They were actually the 4th best in preseason when it comes to the pick and roll ball handler. You know, this is where your ball handler, whether it's a guard or Zion Williamson or Trey Murphy or Herb Jones, because they all did some of that, you know, is using the screen set by the big man to either drive, get a mid-range jump shot, shoot from 3, whatever it might be. The possession ends with the person who was the pick and roll ball handler there. Zion Williamson is an excellent ball handler. And so when you see what he was doing in the pick and roll in preseason, in those NBA games, he was scoring at a very, very high level, one of the best in the league in preseason when it came down to it. When you factor in that they were playing against teams like Houston, very tall, or an elite defensive team last year in the Orlando Magic, the fact that he was basically in the 99th percentile of all of that is a highly encouraging thing to see from him. It's small sample size, so this could change, but he has traditionally been a good pick and roll ball handler for this team, whether it's with the court gravity or his finishing ability around the rim. You know, he also added in that mid-range jumper this preseason as well. You saw it. He started to drive, realized the rim was really taken away, so pulled up, whether it was just a pull-up, you know, a runner or kind of a push shot, put shot, whatever it might be. He did really well there too. Jordan Poole graded out as very good as the pick and roll ball handler in terms of scoring as well. That's encouraging. You don't want Jordan Poole to do that full time, but in some spots here and there, that works. That's the best way to use him, is kind of that secondary ball handler here. He's not going to be elite at this on the same level of Zion Williamson, but he does grade out as very good. And so that was encouraging to see. You then throw in a mix of someone like Jeremiah Fierce, who improved as preseason went on, really playing downhill, and you can see the playmaker that he is outside of the pick and roll. He grades out as average in this, and that's more just that his field goal percentage isn't good and he wasn't scoring as efficiently. That's going to come with time. He's a rookie. We're not expecting him to be elite at this from day one. You have a couple of possessions from Herb Jones as the pick and roll ball handler, from Trey Murphy in that kind of mix as well. And all those guys are average to good. There isn't like a weak player there where you're like, oh, this is going to be a problem. While you want to have kind of a defined point guard, and you have that more in Fears than anybody else here, Zion Williamson's doing the majority of this, I think, during the regular season. That's going to work. And I think he's going to be really good there too. When you factor in the other part of the pick and roll man, lob threat, play finisher, that's Yves Missi here. In fact, they didn't really use Zion Williamson much as a pick and roll man. He was the ball handler in this. He's not really setting screens for people and rolling to the rim. This was predominantly Yves Missi here, and he did a really good job. 1.5, so 1.5 points per possession. That's an incredible number. Using him as a play finisher, that's the best way to use him. That lob threat, you saw him in that a couple of times. He's going to do pretty well in that. Looney did well. Makovich did well in this. When you have these elite ball handlers that can kind of manipulate a defense, even if it's just with their court gravity, that will take you pretty far and open things up for others. And all they got to go up and do is just get the ball and throw it down. You're seeing that. This is the majority of the Pelicans offense here when you factor into it. When you throw in transition too, where they were good, everyone's kind of good in transition, right? That's about 50% of the offense. 50% of the offense is pick and rolls and transition for New Orleans. If you're going to be good in both of those, half the battle right there, right? The pick and roll is also what you're doing in the half court. That's kind of been the big concern. They need to be running so many pick and roll actions consistently. And if they do that, as they did in preseason, I do think New Orleans and their offense can be in a really good spot. There are some concerns about the isolation play. I trust Zion with this. I trust Jordan Poole with this. That's about it. But they weren't running a ton of just like dribble the ball, don't do much isolation. It was under 7% of their offense, but they did really struggle in that regard here. I think that can get better. Zion wasn't particularly great in isolation situations, so trying to use him, involving him in actions with other players, I think is going to be really key. Jeremiah Fears looked pretty good in isolation, so that's encouraging too. Jordan Poole did a good enough job when it comes to isolation here. One concern is going to be 3-point shooting and spot up situations. So you drive, you attack, you kick the ball out. That leads to a spot up situation. New Orleans did a pretty good job there. They had an field goal percentage, so it's factoring in threes of 52.1%. It's not elite, but it's good. I'd like this to be better than what it is, certainly, but it's passable for right now. That could change if you don't make your threes or you start to run into trouble from that. And they're in spot-up situations, their 3-point percentage was 32.1% in all of preseason. That's a concern. You're going to need to hit those threes. And you can't just rely on kind of like outlet, mid-range jumpers, things like that. That's kind of the area that concerns me the most offensively. They look good in transition. They look good in the pick and roll. Hit your shots when those things kind of fall apart. That's my biggest concern about New Orleans in their offense. We'll see. There's reasons to be encouraged that Saddiq Bey was really good in those spot-up situations. So you feel if he's going to be in the rotation, and he certainly is going to be, that is potentially very encouraging that he was kind of in there doing a really good job with that. But overall, there are definitely some concerns with some of these players. Jordan Poole was really good in spot-up situations, but it starts to drop, right? Fears was not great, and he did a bunch. Trey Murphy was good in those, but someone like Jose Alvarado was not. You also had Herb Jones, who was not as well. Carlo Makovich wasn't good in those, and he's kind of your stretch big. That's the one area that concerns me the most. But overall, you can see a glimpse of the offensive potential for this team. And if you know anything about my show and how I kind of view this, when you Offense and defense are tied together. So if the offense is better, does that make the defense better? Actually better than you think. Let's get into that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Built. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, may as well get something for it. And that's where Built comes in. Built is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards that you can use. So when you pay rent through Built, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed towards hundreds of hotels, airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. I love that with Built, rent finally works for you. You're earning points every month on something you already have to pay. And whether you're grabbing food at your favorite local restaurant or heading to the gym, you can still earn rewards. And Built has made everyday life feel more rewarding because of that. So turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure to use that link so that they know we sent you. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Skims. I'm wearing a pair of these right now. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was pretty intrigued. And I'd heard a lot about the quality from friends and family, so I wanted to give it a try. Lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear. It's never the most comfortable thing, right? Or finding the right fit, comfort, style, all of that. Skims has changed all of that, and their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. I'm moving throughout the day. I'm running between meetings. I'm trying to go to the gym. I'm running around the arena, all of those things. So I need something that's breathable, that feels good. I'm on planes a lot of the time too, but I don't like wearing that kind of like jersey gym feeling material all day long. But the stretch 5-inch boxer brief, it doesn't have that. This is just exactly what I've been looking for. A nice soft material that's breathable, that doesn't feel like I'm wearing workout clothes all day long. They never lose their shape. They never ride up, which is always great. I just really love these. Literally wearing a pair right now. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey, select Locked On Pelicans or Locked On NBA in the drop-down menu that follows over at skims.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everyday. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everyday, let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget, you can follow us on YouTube wherever you get your podcasts and the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Same place you watch your Pelicans play. For your second listen, it's Locked On Saints. When are they going to make the change to Tyler Shook? It's probably time, in my opinion. Sounds like it's coming soon. Locked On Saints is going to be making sense of everything black and gold over at the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's switch to defense. I believe offense and defense are connected, something that someone like Joe Mazzulla really believes in too. I think this is much closer to soccer in terms of how connected they are compared to something like the NFL where they're not entirely. You know, defense fell off a cliff for New Orleans last season after posting back-to-back seasons of top 6, top 7, depending on where you look, defensive seasons under head coach Willie Green. And we saw some concerns about this. Pelicans were giving up a lot of points to the NBA teams in preseason, but I don't think it's as bad as you think. There were a couple of areas where New Orleans really shined in this. So look, the biggest concern is going to be transition defense. You know, they spent way too much time defending transition in the 2 NBA preseason games that they played, and that will eat you alive. You're going to hear me, if you're an everyday or a longtime listener, you've heard me referred to point per shot type, point per possession, right? PPP essentially is what it comes down to. And that's how you can kind of calculate efficiency. Number one efficiency is basically at the free throw line. You know, you do really well at the free throw line. You're basically getting a point per shot attempt, right? Or like 2 points per shot attempt, depending on how you want to view it. The second most is transition offense. You know, it's a different than kind of shot type because there's shot types in transition offense. But if you look at it in terms of play type, transition offense is where you eat teams alive. You're in a fast break. You're running down the court. You're likely going to score a layup or something like that. You see it all the time. And that's why fast break points per game is a really important stat to keep an eye on. if you're giving up transition opportunities, whether it's through line ball turnovers or something else, that's going to kill you. You can't do that. Every team, even if they are in the bottom third of it, grades out well in transition. And even those teams in the bottom third of transition are scoring better than the top teams in NBA half-court offense. So you really need to limit your time playing transition defense. A lot of this is tied to the offense too. When you make a basket, your opponent has to inbound the ball. It lets your defense get back and get set in the 2-3 seconds that it takes for an NBA team to try and do that. That's the best way to limit transition opportunities, in my opinion. It's like, don't turn the ball over and just freaking score. Now, the Pelicans did a good bit of scoring. Their offense was good in preseason. However, against the Rockets and Orlando, they were defending transition opportunities a lot because opponents were running after makes. This, truthfully, is unacceptable and one of the biggest areas of concern for this Pelicans defense. You can't do this. After you make a basket, get back. Simple as that. Just get back, hustle back, get set, and defend in the half court and make your opponent play in the half court. Except New Orleans was kind of lackadaisical running back after makes. Not an ideal situation for them here. And you saw the opponents inbound the ball quickly and try and run and just catch New Orleans off guard, essentially. That's a coaching thing. That's an effort thing. You need to be prepared for this. You need to realize this is what you're doing and you need to fix that. If they give up volume in terms of transition opportunities, even if they do a good job of defending it, and by the way, they did a good job of defending transition in terms of points per shot attempt. But the problem with that is, even being very good, it's 1.078 points per possession in transition. That's not great. Like, that's really, really bad. You can't do that. That grades out as very good, right? Like, that's not what you want here. So they need to improve that significantly. Significantly is what they need to do a much better job of. Limit that. And the good news is they have the ability to. They were making their shots. They can get back. Simple as that. This wasn't like they were turning the ball over a ton and it was leading to transition opportunities. This is actually something that, they control more of. On the good news front of all of this is they were really good at containing the pick and roll. I watched literally every pick and roll possession from opponents in the Pelicans on defense here. And they did a really good job of limiting scoring opportunities in that. This is where you can really see Zion Williamson's commitment that he was disrupting pick and rolls left and right, often as the primary defender, as the ball handler defender. So not like on a big man, he would switch either onto the ball handler or he would just stay on the ball handler and fight through a screen. He did a really, really good job of this, I thought, and really disrupted the pick and roll for opponents here. That's a big sign that Zion is different this year, that he is bought in more so than we've ever seen before. The Pelicans, in terms of their coverage, were actually mixing it up much more than you've seen in the past. And this feels like some growth on the defensive side of the ball. Before, they just like to switch. Right, screen comes, big man switches onto the guard switches onto the big man, and you don't need to worry about fighting through the screen, or you've pre-switched, and so then you switch your guard onto a guard, big man onto a big man because they switched before knowing that this was coming. But you saw a number of different times where they were going to just fight through screens, where they hedged and tried to trap the ball handler and did a bunch of like different things like that. So all of that is really impressive that they were mixing up coverages and doing a number of different things. Overall, you saw a team when you watch these plays just be much more connected to one another, like much more in tune with one another. And they did a really good job of containing drives that way, forcing turnovers. You didn't see a ton of miscues against the NBA team where it's like, oh, were we switching? I didn't realize that. And all of a sudden a ball handler just has free reign to the basket. They were very much looking like a team, in my opinion, in all of that. So when you watch all of that, right, like New Orleans has the makings of a good defensive team, and this starts to look more like the defense from the past couple of seasons for New Orleans. One area to keep an eye on, and this is a big one, is defensive rebounding. New Orleans, keep an eye on it yet. They kind of mitigated the damage here. New Orleans gave up a lot of offensive boards in preseason. Did not defensive rebound at a good rate at all. But they limited the damage of those second chance points. They gave up an offensive rebound. They would eventually force a miss, and eventually get the defensive board. That's great. Good job. of like not letting your mistakes destroy you here. But in volume, if you keep doing this over a large enough sample size, this is going to kill you, right? That sample size being 10 games, 20 games, 30, 40, the whole season, this will absolutely destroy you. This is something they need to figure out. Defensive rebounding. It's not good enough that it's like, well, we gave up boards, but we didn't give up the second chance points. You're just having to work extra hard. That's going to tire you out over the course of the game. And eventually you're just not going to be able to defend at the high level. You look at this in terms of rim pressure. You know, the Pelicans don't let people get there. Have it in the past, and that's been good because if you're letting up tons of shots at the rim, even if you're a good, rim protecting team, in volume, you're still going to lose that battle, and it's not going to be great. But the Pelicans, when you watch them on defense in those 2 NBA games, really do have the makings, I think, of a pretty decent, like at least average NBA defense. You know, if not going back to what we've seen from them, a couple of years. They did a really good job of like forcing opponents to like not score a ton in spot up situations. So that's encouraging too. That's usually one of kind of like the biggest things for New Orleans. They gave up, on spot up threes, 34.2%. It's a pretty low percentage. I feel good about that sort of thing for New Orleans. They've done that repeatedly where like opponents don't shoot well against them from three, even if it's in decent volume. Last year, they gave up 36.5%. Years before that, it's been good too. It's tough to try and quantify that and make sense of what's going on with some of those statistics here. But overall, they do a good job of not letting teams make threes against them over the past couple of years. And that trend seems to be continuing this season at the very least. So coming up next, well, what do you think about the offense and defense in preseason? Let me know in the comments down below. Coming up next, a surprise on the opening night roster for the Pelicans. A couple of other things that I want to go over with y'all as well. It's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Mint Mobile. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. I said yes to making the switch, and now you get premium wireless at $15 a month. Mint makes it simple. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your own phone and keep your same number in contacts. So I love that you're getting the same quality service you had before, but at a fraction of the price. And the setup is super simple. You keep your number and then you're up and running in minutes. So ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch over at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for the first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join us on YouTube as well. Over 12,000 Pelicans fans. And don't forget, you can watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. And speaking of the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, they are on DirecTV. The channel is out. Consult your guide. If you have DirecTV Stream, Uverse, you can get the Pelicans for free, no additional charge, with the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network channel. It is on there now. You'll be able to watch the Pelicans on Wednesday on opening night. By the way, we're going to be live here on YouTube. Right after that game ends, we're going to go live on YouTube, give the instant reaction to the opening night of the Pelicans game, of the Pelicans season. We will preview that in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. There was a bit of a surprise from the Pelicans here as they gear up for the start of the regular season, and that was the final roster spot. What was going to happen there? Well, we now have an announcement as the Pelicans put out their opening night roster, and hey, Jaden Springer, signed to a non-guaranteed deal, is on it. He is on the team on opening night. I don't want to say he's fully in the final roster spot here, because he's on an unguaranteed deal that guarantees later. So they have time to waive him later without basically paying him over the course of the season. That's something that's worth keeping in mind here. But he's here for now. He didn't get a ton of run in preseason. Not that he really needed to anyway. But it's interesting that they decided to keep him, maybe a little bit of guard depth, maybe on defense on that side of the ball. They've run kind of a small backcourt that I don't love. So maybe if you're going to do that, you need Jaden Springer in there for defensive coverage. It makes sense. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets waived later or, somehow included in a trade or something along those lines. But I wouldn't say he's like safe on this roster for the whole NBA season whatsoever here. Also of note, it was extension day yesterday, and no extension for Jordan Poole or Zion Williamson, both of whom were eligible. That's no surprise. There was no reason for either side to do that at all, so it's not a big shock that neither did. So there you go. A little bit of a surprise that Jaden Springer was on the roster. I figured, they could kind of be cheap, save some money by not paying him for however long they keep him. He's basically getting paid by the day, by the game. But they're not, so that's good. It's not being the cheapest you could be. I'll take that any day of the week here. And we'll end up seeing what they do with the final roster spot. But I would imagine they want to kind of keep that open for some midseason move, something along those lines. But maybe Springer impresses, and we will see. So we're going to preview opening night tomorrow. We'll recap that on Wednesday after that. Dylan Sanders is going to join me on the Friday show as well. The home opener on Friday. We got a lot more here to come this whole season on Locked On Pelicans. There's going to be a couple updates on the show too that I'll probably tell you all about in the next week or so that I'm excited. Well, I'm excited for me about when it comes to all of that. So I'll tell you all what that is a little bit later here. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate y'all listening. Be back tomorrow for opening night for the Pelicans. See y'all then.